Okay, so this is another fireside chat because I love having this monitor. When this room is done, we're going to play with it. We're going to do strange things with it, I'm sure. I want to talk about acoustics relative to noise complaints in neighborhoods and environmental aspects, and talk about regulations that towns make. So if I were going to title this, I would say, get your act together and come up with some real regulations. Most of the regulations we see are one of two or maybe three things. One of them is a dBA thing where they say, we don't want sound above X number of dBA at the perimeter of a property. I've seen other ones that say things like, we don't want to annoy anybody. One of my favorite ones recently was, we want to make sure we don't have any annoyance to abutters.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So first I had to look up what an abutter was, and I guess it's a neighbor. They couldn't say neighbor because that would be too easy. So these kinds of codes are kind of absurd, because the real issue with any kind of an annoyance, whether it's your neighbor or an industrial plant or a solar farm, yes, they do make noise, or other things, and we'll talk about that in another video. Anything of that nature, what really matters is I live someplace and suddenly I've got a new noise that somebody threw in my face that I didn't have before, and I may or may not like it depending on who I am, what my hearing's like, what things I like to do outdoors, etc. So if you're going to make a noise code, what you need to be doing is looking at frequency, intensity, and duration. Certain frequencies are extremely annoying. Whether it's a hum down at low frequencies, we're just kind of going boom, or a buzzing noise up at high frequencies, like bzzz, like inverters at a solar farm, or whether it's just general noise, whatever it might be. Regulations need to look at audibility. Now, audibility is something that's really hard to define because you need to know what the background noise is. So the first thing you want to look at in a neighborhood, if you're looking at trying to do something and correct and mitigate noise, is you got to go do noise tests. At the times of day, people are likely to be annoyed. Now that would be during the daytime in the summer where people are outdoors. It would be in the evenings in the summer when people are outdoors. And it's much quieter typically in most areas at night. So you have to do some noise studies, and how exhaustive they are, there's a lot of debate. Personally, I think if you show up at a time of day that's kind of medium busy, like, mid-morning, and you show up in the evening and you show up at different times, and you take 15-20 minute average measurements, I think that's adequate. Some people say you got to do these long-term average measurements called LEQs for an hour or 10 hours or 20 hours. But the truth is, the way people perceive sound is based on averages. So car driving by, which would become part of an average if you take it too long, makes it look like there's really more noise than there is, because that car wasn't driving by when your big noise was happening when the car wasn't there. So the way noise regulation should be written, it should be based on absolutely having to do background noise tests, using an audibility standard that has to do with tonality, meaning any frequencies that pop up above background, like dogs barking. And nobody argues about dogs because lots of people have them, but they stick out above everything. Wind noise, traffic noise, everything else. The dog barking is right up there. So whistles, hums, squeaks, buzzes, those things are non-natural sounds and should be excluded in any area where they don't exist. Now, if you've got a frequency that's up there, let's say, let's say there's kind of like a whine from a fan that occurs at 600 hertz. So there's this kind of whistly kind of sound, and it's sitting up at 55 dB and background noise is down below that. That's going to be a problem. That whistly sound really needs to be 10 dB below average background level for it not to be perceived in most cases. If it's not a whistly sound, if it's like an air conditioner, air conditioning blends in a lot better with wind noise, trees rustling, etc. You can be within 5 dB and most people won't have a problem. But the problem we have as consultants is we get these calls, and we get them all the time. We need to be sure no one's going to be bothered by this thing we've already decided to do that we didn't think about. And then we're faced with a regulation that says something silly that doesn't mean anything, and then we have to translate that into a report that tells them what's really going to happen and the likelihood that they're going to get phone calls or not get phone calls based on doing the due diligence of doing the background noise measurements and then looking at the frequency content of the thing we're trying to fix. And the real fun is when people don't give you the information to fix the problem. And that'll be the subject of our next video on solar power. Yes, it makes noise. So we're going to do solar power next. I'm going to stop this video. This will be fun. I'm going to make Miller work his butt off. Bye.